Happy White History Month. I have back with me Alex Newman. He's back, and he is an award-winning international journalist with a global reputation for hard-hitting reporting and the founder of Liberty Sentinel. Alex, welcome back to the show. Happy White History Month.
Hey, how's it going, Jesse? It's great to be with you again.
All is well. Happy White History.
Hey, thank you. Never heard of White History Month, but thank you.
July is White History Month. We celebrate, this is our second year. I started White History Month last year, and this is our second year celebrating in July. And so that's one of the reasons I want to have you on, too. Not just that, but because I want to talk about history in America and what's happening right now. What is it like for you hearing that you're a hard-hitting reporter?
Well, it's, I do a lot of work in the New American Magazine. I go all around the world tracking down the UN Climate Circus, seeing what they're doing on the global warming front, the sustainability front, all these different things. So it's a lot of fun. And, it's also, I think, very important because there's really nobody out there aside from the New American, aside from, a small group of us who are doing this work. There will be thousands of so-called reporters at these UN conferences, and yet 99 out of 100 will be, official stenographers totally drinking the Kool-Aid. Hey, yeah, let's have global climate taxes. Let's have global government. And so, it's really up to us. Unfortunately, I wish there was more people doing it to go there and ask the hard questions and to report just the truth about what's happening, because the truth itself is so incredible and there's almost nobody there willing to talk about it. So, so that's kind of what I do. And, I thoroughly enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
What is the purpose of Liberty Sentinel? What's that for?
Well, it's it's a blog that I've had for many, many years. I kind of just use it to throw stuff up from time to time. I also do a lot of consulting work. Most of my work in journalism appears in the New American Magazine, which I know you're familiar with. I also write for a wide array of different publications at WND, I've written for all kinds of magazines in the U.S. and around the world. But really, the goal is always to get people accurate and truthful information that they can use in the battle to defend our freedom, to defend our churches, to defend the family, and to defend really everything that's good. So,
I've noticed that in America today, there's a hard, serious effort to erase the history of America, erase white history. They are taking down monuments and statues and just doing everything to be sure that we forget American history. Why is that? Yeah,
you're absolutely right, Jesse. Right now, I'm actually on a national speaking tour called Rescuing Our Children, and the whole purpose of my tour is to show parents, to show pastors, to show legislators, school board members, school officials, what's going on in the public school system. You're exactly right. They are trying to erase and distort and destroy our history, and in many cases, they're outright lying to the children, Jesse. To give you one example, one of my colleagues who's working on this project with me, Dr. Duke Pesta, he's a university professor. He's been giving surveys to children coming out of the government schools for over a decade, and he's found that more than half of them believe that America invented slavery.
Yeah.
Now, if these kids had learned anything in their government school education, they would know that slavery has been ubiquitous throughout human history, and that many of America's founding fathers and the principles that America was founded on, the idea that God created everyone equally, the idea that God gave everyone inalienable rights. Those are the principles that eradicated slavery, not just in America, but all over the world. In 2007, you could still buy and sell slaves legally in Mauritania, for crying out loud. And yet they're teaching our children that America invented slavery. They're teaching them that the Pilgrims came over here for greed, and they don't teach them what they wrote in the Mayflower Compact, that they came over here for the glory of God, to spread the gospel, to advance the kingdom. They're teaching them that the Second Amendment protects the right of the government to have a militia. And the reason why, Jesse, I think is very clear. They want to destroy, they want to completely undermine the only nation in the world that was founded on the principles of freedom, the idea that God rules, that God is sovereign, God gave us individual rights, God gave us responsibilities, and that the purpose of the government is to protect those rights. They're trying to build, their little, they call it their New World Order, their little global system, and America stands in the way as a giant roadblock. And so the most effective way for them to be able to break down that roadblock is to indoctrinate our children, and that's exactly what's happening.
And they pretend to do it to appease or to make black people happy. They said they want to get rid of statues and monuments and things like that so blacks would not be reminded of slavery. And so I say that they're lying about that they're using blacks for their another agenda while pretending to love black people. What do you say about that?
I agree with you entirely. In fact, I think it's disgusting the way that black people and other racial groups in the United States are being exploited by what I call the deep state. I mean, it's happening to white people, too. They're just trying to divide everybody. They want everybody at everybody's throat. So they're telling you, oh, it's all Jews, it's all Catholics, it's black people, it's white people, instead of just saying, hey, we're all Americans and we share certain things in common. We have an amazing heritage of liberty. We were blessed to be born in the freest, most amazing, most prosperous country in the history of the world. Why don't we come together around what unites us instead of all these artificial divisions? You know, as far as I'm concerned, race is not even really a thing, right? We all come from Adam. We all came from Noah. There's a human race. Yeah. But the establishment, in an effort to destroy America, you know, the Soviets figured this out almost 100 years ago. Like, hey, we could play up these racial divisions. We can get people fighting with each other and tearing down the country. And I think that's exactly what's happening, Jesse. You mentioned how they're claiming to do this all in the name of black people. It's ludicrous, but that's exactly right. And I think the purpose is very clear. Undermine our freedom, destroy our national cohesiveness so that they can move forward in building this global system that they want.
Not all, but most. Why can't the blacks see that they're being used for destruction? Because blacks, not all, but most, they tend to join forces with these people to destroy this country. Why can't the blacks see that they're being used for negative reasons, not positive?
Yeah, I think it's really for the same reason that so many white people and so many Hispanic people can't see it. It's because, first of all, we have an incredible system of indoctrination in the public school system. You know, we have something like 87% of America's children are being brainwashed for 12 straight years, 5 days a week, for 8 hours a day. They don't know how to think. They don't know how to read. They don't know how to reason. They don't know even the basic rudimentary rules of logic. They don't know anything about history. And so when you have people like that, which really unfortunately represents the bulk of America today, from all races, if you want to call them races, I mean, they are incapable of coming to correct conclusions. First of all, because they don't have the correct information, the correct facts, and second of all, because they don't have the correct reasoning tools. And you know, I say if we don't deal with this, we're going to lose our country. And I think the only way to deal with this is to educate the people. First of all, they need to know their own history. I mean, they need to know the things that the government school didn't tell them about, or the things that the government school lied to them about. And the fake media, too. You know, the fake media is very adept at this. And I think that's why people can't see it. They've been blinded. And in many cases, too, people have become dependent on the government. You know, all across America, people are taking government checks. And when you're taking a government check, you know, you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. If the hand that feeds you tells you this is going on, okay. And I think that's a big part of the problem, Jesse.
Why do so many parents, including Christian parents, sacrifice their children to the public educational system? The parents have to see what's happening, because when you send your child off to school, they're nice kids. When they come back, they're held to pay. So you have to see the change. Why do parents sacrifice their children to public schools?
I love the way you put that, Jesse. I think you just hit the nail on the head. They are sacrificing their children to these schools. And in many cases, I think the reason why is they don't really understand what's happening. You know, some of them went to school in the 70s and the 80s. You know, things were bad, but they weren't that bad, at least. Right. That's the public perception, because we're now several generations deep into the brainwashing. You know, if our grandparents' generation had seen what they're teaching the kids in the school today, they would have gotten the tar and feathers out. It would have been, you know, absolute pitchforks and torches, and it would have been absolutely wild. And so I think that's a big part of the problem, is the parents don't recognize what's happening, partly because they themselves were indoctrinated, they themselves were dumbed down in the government school system, and second of all, because it's free. You know, a lot of parents out there think, well, hey, I have basically a free babysitting service for 5 days a week for 12 years, and that means my wife and I can both work. That means we can have two incomes. That means we can drive a fancy car, and we can go on nice vacations. And they're not thinking, you know, okay, yeah, maybe you drive a nice car now, maybe you live in a slightly bigger house now, but what are the consequences of that going to be? Your kid is going to be turned against you. Your kid is going to be weaponized against your family, against the parents, against the church, against their country. And the consequences of that are going to be absolutely disastrous. So I think part of it is ignorance. Parents don't know how bad it is. And part of it is just convenience. And, and I think a third important part is that the pastors aren't speaking out.
Yeah.
The Bible has a lot to say about education, and never in any place in the Bible, I've searched it frontwards and backwards, up and down, there is no reference in there to Caesar educating children. It's ludicrous. Every reference to the education of children involves parents and the church.
Yeah.
So the government should not be doing that, but the pastors are silent. The great majority of America's pastors are not teaching this to their congregations. They are not telling them what's happening in the school system. And so we end up in the situation where the overwhelming majority of parents are sacrificing their children. I love the term you used, to this crazy system that is going to destroy our country, is going to destroy our people.
Why the pastors are not speaking up? Most of them are not. I don't know. I mean, maybe you can find one or two, but why they're not speaking up?
Yeah, there are some, but they're rare. I've been traveling all across the country. I've had over 50 speeches in something like 28 states at this point. And I've met a lot of pastors, and they want to do the right thing. But I think there's several things at work here. The first is a lot of pastors don't realize how bad it's gotten. A lot of pastors don't want to realize how bad it's gotten, because that means they would have to speak out. But they don't want to warn their congregation that there's transgender pedophiles coming in there wearing demon horns to read LGBT stories to children. They don't want to tell them that they don't want to know that they're teaching 5-year-olds that the gender is a spectrum and you can be agender, bigender, trigender. But this is stuff that's actually happening today. And I think part of the reason is pastors are ignorant. They don't realize how bad it's gotten. Maybe they went to school in the 70s. Maybe they didn't pay close attention to what their kids were taught. Maybe they homeschooled their own children, so they don't know. And another part, and I don't mean to sound condescending to pastors here, because I know a lot of them are trying to do what's right, but they don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah.
And there's 3 public school teachers in my congregation, and if I tell everybody that they should take their kids out and give them a godly Christian education, well, then those 3 public school teachers might leave, and they'll take their tithing with them. So I think that's a big problem. And what I say to pastors in that case is those teachers in your congregation already know what's happening in the public school system. They're probably wondering why you're not telling the congregation. They're far more likely than non-public school teachers to homeschool their kids or to put their kids in a private school. That ought to tell us something. So I think pastors need to be more courageous, and I think they need to educate themselves on what's happening, because unless and until pastors start speaking out, a lot of parents will, hey, pastor didn't say anything, I'll just send my kids right to the government school. And that has become a deadly threat to the United States.
I believe, too, that it's because most preachers and pastors and reverends and whatever they call themselves have not been called by God. Because if you're truly called by God, you don't have fear. You have perfect love. And perfect love casts out fear. And they would know that one of their jobs is to point out evil and point the people back to good, so that they can be protected and do the right thing. So I just don't think you can be called by God and have fear. So I think that they're just not called by God. That's why they have to go to school to be preachers and stuff, because God is not guiding them.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jesse. And in fact, the scripture is so filled with instructions for pastors and for parents.
Yeah.
If these pastors were reading their Bible, I love what you just said. Ephesians 5:11 tells us to reprove and to expose evil.
Yeah.
If you're a pastor and you're not exposing this incredible danger to the children in your congregation or to the parents so that they can protect their children from this, I think you're derelict in your duty.
Yes.
God put you as a shepherd there to protect the flock. And it's interesting, the Nehemiah Institute did a survey. They found that something like 80% of Christian children who go through 12 years of government education, well, we should put education in quotes, are going to leave the church.
Yeah.
So these pastors are actually shooting themselves in both feet by choosing to remain silent on these issues. Your congregation is going to be empty once the next generation rises up and the previous generation dies off. You're going to have nobody to preach to.
Yeah.
You're going to have nothing in the collection plate. So, for your own self-interest, you need to get involved with this. But I agree with you, Jesse. These pastors, they need to be praying about this, and they need to be opening the Bible to see what God has to say about all these things.
Are you a Christian?
I am, absolutely.
Amazing. That's good, man. So will the left ever be satisfied and stop destroying the monuments and statues? Will they ever get to a point where they say, you know what, we've done enough destruction, we're satisfied?
Never. Absolutely never. People keep thinking if we just appease them one more time, then everything's going to be fine. And what we see is every time you appease them, they want to go even further, right? They say, oh, we just want to get rid of the Confederate monuments. And then, oh, well, now we just want to get rid of the founding fathers who owned slaves, right? It's the same thing on every front, right? Oh, we just don't want to be, persecuted for being homosexual. Oh, well, we just want to be able to have so-called marriage equality. We just want to redefine marriage to include homosexual union. Now it's, we want your church to agree with us. And if you don't, we want to haul you into court and remove your tax exemption status. We want to put you in jail, right? All kinds of Western countries now, pastors are going to prison for speaking out against homosexuality. So you give them an inch, they demand a mile, and then they'll come back for more every single time. The left will not be satisfied until they have completely obliterated every last vestige of our society, of our civilization, of our history. We have got to take this seriously. And I think you're right on the money, Jesse. We need to stand up now and say no further. In fact, we need to push them back because there is never a point at which they will be satisfied. We need to resist this with every fiber of our being.
I think people don't realize that the left are representing evil. And just as in your own personal life, if you don't overcome evil by being born again, then it will destroy you, your family, and everything in your personal life. Likewise, in our public life, the left are of evil, and they will destroy everything if good doesn't stand up and stop them.
I agree 100%. And in fact, God tells us over and over again that this is a spiritual battle. And we are actually, I love that you have the courage to say this, Jesse, because we are dealing with actual evil. A lot of naive people out there want to think, oh, it's just a difference of, policy. It's just a difference of opinion. We're dealing with evil. Yeah. We are absolutely dealing with evil. And, if you doubt that, just look at all the things that God has ordained. Look at all the things that God has defined as evil, and look at how the left is embracing them. So, God ordained marriage. And so we see the left waging war on marriage. God ordained that there should be nations, right? He says multiple times in his word, he ordained there should be nations. So we see globalism trying to undermine nations. God ordained that there should be private property. He said, thou shalt not steal. So we see the left trying to institutionalize thievery by stealing from all the haves and handing it out to themselves, and then, supposedly to the have-nots. We see even basic things that God has ordained under attack, like God created the male and female. Now we see them teaching 5-year-old children in the government schools that that's bigotry, and that actually there's a gender spectrum and you can be anywhere on it. So if you doubt that we're dealing with evil, just look at everything God has told us is good, look at everything God has told us is evil, and look at how the left embraces evil in every case. They want to murder babies, for crying out loud, even after they're born. I mean, what more evidence do you need that we're dealing with evil, right?
If men were to become men and return back to their natural state of being, of God and Christ, Christ and man, man over woman, woman over children, if men were to become men, would evil have the type of impact that it's having now?
Absolutely not. And that's why I love your ministry so much, Jesse, because you talk about rebuilding the man. That is one of the crucial things that we could do to restore our society, to restore our freedoms, to restore our churches. Because if there are strong men who are good leaders in their household, spiritual leaders, providers for their children, protecting their children from evil, protecting their wives from evil, this evil could not continue spreading, right? Right now it's getting access to our children because husbands and fathers are not fulfilling their mandate as commanded by God. So we need men to stand out. We need men to be good husbands, right? Don't leave your family. We need men to be good fathers, protect your children, bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And that would wipe out so much of this evil that is now infesting our homes, our churches, our communities, and obviously Congress and Washington, D.C., right? So I love your ministry, Jesse, because that is such a crucial part of any solution. We are never going to be able to restore our society or our freedoms without rebuilding the man so that the family can be rebuilt as basically the fundamental unit of any reasonable society.
Amazing. I really appreciate that. Two quick questions because we ran out of time. Have you ever imagined, just for a minute, what would America look like if these people are allowed to destroy everything, destroy the statues and the monuments and the real history of America? What would America look like?
Well, it's amazing. We really don't have to speculate, Jesse, because we've seen this movie before, right? I come from Miami. You can't throw a rock in any direction without hitting somebody who's lived under this exact type of thing. And, Cuba. right?
Yeah.
We saw what happened in Cuba. They destroyed the history. They murdered tens of thousands of people. China is another great example. During the Cultural Revolution, they went through and they purged all the elements of their old. They took down the statues. They burned all the books. They tortured their parents. And we see where this goes, right? We've seen this over and over again.
Yeah.
It leads to concentration camps. It leads to torture. It leads to mass death. It leads to starvation, right? And I think a lot of the naive, useful idiots on the left don't realize that will be the end destination. But that is inevitably where this will go, right? When you destroy a people's history, when you destroy the basic building blocks of that society, like the family, like the churches, like the community, like the harmony that exists, you end up with a terrible tragedy. And again, we don't have to speculate because we've seen this happen so many. I think a lot of Americans are just really naive. They don't know what's happened in other parts of the world and other parts of history. But if you look out across the world throughout human history, the norm has been exactly what you're describing,
Yes.
the breakdown of these things.
Yeah.
So if the left is successful, it will be a horror show like you can't imagine. And again, we don't have to speculate either because these people have told us, right? The FBI agent who infiltrated the Weather Underground, the terrorist organization founded by Bill Ayers. Of course, Barack Obama started his political career in the living room of Bill Ayers. He said these people, the leadership of this terror organization, which was working with the communist Cuban government, they were going to invite the Chinese, they were going to invite the Soviets, the North Koreans to come into America and occupy it. They were going to put tens of millions of Americans in camps, and they were going to exterminate 25 million people. This is where this always ends up, is in the slaughter and the elimination of political opponents and in a total horror show. That's what will happen if they win. And so, I don't want to motivate people using fear because, as you pointed out, God has not given us a spirit of fear.
Right.
But we need to recognize that the consequences of failing to do something about this will be catastrophic.
As I said in the introduction, I started White History Month last year, and July is White History Month. And this year we're celebrating right now. And every time I mention White History Month, not every time, but sometimes when I mention White History Month, there are people who say, well, white history is celebrated every day. I want to know from you, is that true?
I don't think it is. In fact, it's the one history month that you're not allowed to celebrate.
Yes.
And I don't think the deep state, if you will, the establishment, the evil forces waging war against, I don't think they have anything particularly against white people because of a lack of melanin or anything. I think what they really hate is its association with Western Christian civilization, which really, helped spread the gospel around the world, helped spread individual freedom around the world, helped spread civilization around the world. And so they think if we can demonize this civilization by demonizing people who have the skin color of the people who developed that civilization through biblical principles, right? It wasn't anything about the lack of melanin that caused these civilizations to emerge.
Yeah.
It was because they followed biblical principles. But they figure if we can demonize all that, then we can use it as a battering ram to break down freedom, break down the church, and break down what's good in every culture around the world. And so we see this in Latin America, we see this all over North America, in Europe, and it's nasty. And so I really appreciate you standing up to this stuff, Jesse. It's great to see people willing to call out the lies, call out the insanity, and say, no, there's things of value that we need to preserve in our history.
Yes. Alex, how can people read your writings and keep up with what you're doing?
Well, thank you very much, Jesse. TheNewAmerican.com is the website for The New American Magazine. If you don't subscribe yet to the print magazine, you ought to get it, with the internet censorship. And then also, if people put my name into any search engine, they'll find it. But TheNewAmerican.com is really the best place to read my articles. And then I have an education blog at Freedom Project Media, and I keep my own personal blog at libertysentinel.org.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on, man. Again, I absolutely appreciate it. And I do subscribe to the print magazine. And really good writing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse. Really appreciate it. God bless you.
God bless you, buddy. Thank you. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Alex Newman, folks. Check it out.